Well, hello, and welcome to week number 3 in 110 Acoustics. Here today we will finish Unit 1, Frequency, Wavelength, Speed of Sound. Last week we got through our notes and we ended up in an area I believe called the Doppler effect and the breaking. Hi there, we got a joiner here. Great stuff. And so this is week 3 where we will finish Unit 1. And last week we got up to the Doppler effect and breaking the sound barrier, I believe. That's where we finished. And what we want to do now is talk a lot more about stuff called resonances and stuff and things and stuff like that. So why not, without any further ado, why don't we share screen and look at our notes and we'll see where we were. So if we go here and I pull up the notes, you've seen all of this last week, wavelength and speed of sound on the bottom here. And then we continued on to page 3, and we talked about the speed of sound and the speed of light. We made comparisons, and we talked about the speed of sound depends on the density and the elasticity, in other words, the mass and the stiffness. And then we talked about how sound goes faster through metal, even though it's more dense. You'd think if something is more dense, it says up above here, that stuff goes slower through it. Well, steel is also more stiff than air, the elasticity, so to speak. And so the greater stiffness of steel far outweighs its greater mass, and therefore the speed of sound does go faster through steel. So the part I asked you to kind of really look at was, don't worry about this odd sentence here because you'll just twist your brain, okay? But basically, I had said, and I said, mark it down. The more dense something is, the slower sound goes through. The more stiff something is, the faster sound goes through. And therefore, how does sound go faster through steel? Well, you'd think steel is more dense than air, right? Yes, it is. But steel is also a heck of a lot more stiff than air. And the greater stiffness of steel outweighs its greater density or mass. Therefore, sound goes faster through a railroad track than it does through air. You know, the old saying, I'll keep my ear to the ground. First Nations people used to listen for the buffalo that way. Put your ear to the ground and you can hear the stamp of the hoofs of the buffalo coming through the ground quicker than you will through the air. Sound goes through metals and hard stuff quicker than air. And sound goes faster than in water also than in air. And so just kind of look at that stuff. And I said, highlight this sentence too. Remember, in any medium, whether it's air, water, metal, the speed of sound for all frequencies is equal. So I had to put a star by that one too. So the speed of sound has no relation to the frequency. 1,000 hertz goes just as fast as 2,000 hertz. Then we talked a little bit about the Doppler effect and sonic boom. And I said that stuff just for fun. That was kind of more, that's not stuff you're really going to see that much on a midterm exam or on quizzes or stuff like that. But it's just of interest. The Doppler effect is stuff that happens below the speed of sound. Something coming toward you, you're going to hear a higher frequency, like a car or an ambulance or a cop car coming toward you. The siren, and as soon as it passes you, that's the Doppler effect. The speed of sound plus the speed of the object coming toward you squeezes the sound waves a little bit. Therefore, the frequency goes up. And when the object passes you, you got the speed of sound coming from the car going away from you minus the speed of the car itself. So now the sound waves are a little bit elongated, and so the frequency goes lower. And then we talked about the sonic boom and when a jet or something breaks the sound barrier. So going down here, and you look at this weird slide here. The jet breaking the sound barrier. What's happening is as sound is pushing, and I'll make it larger here, just so you see that guy. Sound is squeezing, the jet is going just as fast as the sound waves are. So the sound waves are moving at what, 766 miles an hour, 340 meters per second, 1,182 feet per second, whatever you want to call it. Sound is moving at that speed, and so is the jet. So the jet has caught up to the speed of sound, and it's squeezing all those waves together now. They're all squished. And because they're all squished, you have a huge condensation. And the jet has to push against that wall and puncture through. And once it does, the condensed molecules fill the rarefacted vacuum behind. And that's the boom, the sonic boom. And I said, you can make a little tiny sonic boom by snapping a towel in the locker room. And the tip of the towel, why it goes whoosh, why it snaps. That snap is a tiny little sonic boom. Okay, anyway, so now let's cut to the chase and go to our notes where we will continue today. So let's start with sound fields. Here you go. A sound field, it's not really a football field, but it's an area in which sound takes place. A free field is an area where sound doesn't have any walls to bounce from. There's no walls, there's no object, there's nothing for sound to bounce off of. If you had an explosion taking place way up in the air, hundreds of feet above the ground, that would be a sound field. You know, just like an open, there's nothing to, it's actually quite rare. So sound in a space, read with me. Sound in a space where there's no reverberation or echoes. Reverberation or echo, that's the bouncing of sound. Okay, yelling across the Grand Canyon, hello, hello, hello. That's, or yelling against you've noticed that yourselves in any situation where the sound bounces off of a wall. Well, that's an echo. So a free field is where there's nothing for sound to bounce from. Okay, and it's actually kind of rare. You don't really find that too often. That's why it says here, hardly exists in reality. Almost everywhere sound occurs, there's something for it to bounce from, something for it to reflect off of. The reflection of sound occurs when it travels from one medium to another. Well, think about it. You're standing 100 feet away from a wall or a big building downtown, and you yell, and the sound is going through air, and then it's going to hit the wall, and it'll bounce back to you. Okay, that happens. That's called an echo. Okay, so it traveled through air, and then it hit brick. That's a different medium. Brick is a different medium from air. So is water. So reflection occurs when sound travels from one medium to another. The sound energy in one medium, air, let's say, increases because the added reflected sound bounces off the second medium. Just like a mirror increases light from a lamp, an actor in an enclosed theater sounds louder than in a wide open theater because the walls are closer. The sound is bouncing around more. Okay? So an echo is when there's a greater time delay than a reverberation. Reverberations and echoes are similar, but they're slightly different. An echo is when it took longer than 1/10 of a second to bounce. Right where I'm highlighting here. It took longer than 1/10 of a second to bounce back. Okay? If the sound takes less than 1/10 of a second to bounce back, you have what's called a reverberation. And a reverberation, you can think about it like this. Think of a gymnasium and someone's bouncing a basketball. The gymnasium, the bounce of the basketball, the reverberation that you hear in that gymnasium, okay, that's going to be, those are reverberations because the sound bouncing back off of the walls took less than 1/10 of a second. So in rooms that are like gymnasiums, they're not big enough to really result in echoes. So the sound bouncing back off of the walls is going to be called a reverberation. The sound bouncing off a wall in a classroom would be reverberation. And here's what we should know. For our clients wearing hearing aids, reverberation is a real drag. Okay, I'll stop sharing for a second. Look at this. I'll move away from here. You see that map hanging against the wall. Okay? Things like that help carpet against the back of a wall helps reduce reverberation. If you've got hard walls in a room and your teacher's talking and a hearing impaired student is in the room, that reverberation is a real drag. Okay, the clatter of sounds in a restaurant too. Some restaurants are very poorly designed when it comes to sound quality. It's much better if you have carpet hanging around so that the sound can get absorbed. It's a much better quality of sound. Okay, so reverberation in classrooms can render hearing impaired students, can make it very difficult for them. And school boards constantly complain about money. Well, one of the better things you can do for very little bit of money is take a tennis ball and cut a hole in it and put it on the bottom of a leg of a chair. And do that 4 times. So you got 4 tennis balls on the bottoms of the legs of the chairs. Then when the chair is dragged across the hard floor, you don't get the screeching. And hang a carpet against the back wall of the classroom. Cuts down on the reverberation. Things like that make a big difference. So now we'll share screen once again and look at our notes and continue down the next page. And look what I said the last page here. Reverberation can wreak havoc with hearing aids on kids in classrooms. Now you get something else on page 4. The last page of our notes for Unit 1, standing wave. A wave that's standing up? Well, not really. A sound bounces back off of a wall, and if the sound bouncing back off the wall is in complete opposite phase with the original sound that hit the wall. Let's see what we're talking about there. We'll go in our PowerPoint here. And we'll talk about phase just to have a slight, there you go, pull up this slide here. Look at the bottom 2 waves there. They're completely out of phase. Okay, so this wave is starting at a condensed phase, rarefacted, condensed phase. This wave starting at a rarefacted and then condensed. These 2 waves added together, you'd get the sound of one hand clapping. Nada. You'd get complete silence. Okay, that's the issue. Standing waves. So it'll cancel itself out and creates a dead spot in the room. Engineers, acoustic engineers, carefully design theaters so that they are acoustically beneficial. So you don't get dead areas in a room where there happen to be standing waves occurring. So that's essentially what that is, okay? So the design of rooms, especially where theaters and movies and stuff like that would take place, acoustics is taken into consideration so that you don't get those dead spots that are caused by standing waves. Standing waves are caused by the sound reflecting off the wall being completely out of phase with the original sound. Anechoic, there's a term to circle. Anechoic means no echo, none. So you have no sound bouncing back at all. It's meant to imitate a free field. There's nothing to bounce off of. It's usually soundproof rooms. Now, soundproof rooms, I'll stop sharing for a second. Soundproof rooms are weird. If you ever go into a soundproof room, it means no sound from the outside is coming in, and no sound from the inside is going out. You could yell all you want, and all your sound is just absorbed. And these are rooms that have big, huge sponges, like long sponges shaped like cones kind of at you, like an ice cream cone, but turned upside so the point is toward you. The whole room has all those things aimed kind of at you. They cost a lot of money, but they're used in research. Anechoic, no sound bounces back. No sound gets through. Soundproof rooms are really quite rare. If you sat in a soundproof room, you would eventually start hearing ringing in your ears. You'd hear your lunch digesting. You'd hear yourself swallowing. You'd hear things that you don't normally hear. When you turn your head, you'd probably hear a bit of cracks in your neck, like acoustic, anechoic rooms are very strange. Now, when you're doing a hearing test, As you will learn later on in this course, or in this program, the Hearing Instrument Sciences program, hearing tests are done in sound treated rooms. Sound treated rooms aren't the same. It's kind of like a waterproof watch, or is it water resistant? Okay, sound treated means lots of sound can't get in, but some can. And when you're doing a hearing test under headphones, you're usually sitting in a sound treated rooms. And that means lots of the sound from outside is blocked out. And if you were inside the room and you yelled, yeah, someone on the outside would kind of be able to hear a bit of you. Okay, so the difference between anechoic and completely or sound treated. Share screen once again and look at our notes. Sound treated rooms. Hearing testing is often done in semi-soundproof rooms. They're often isolated from the rest of the building by double glass with an air space or whatever. Ambient room noise outside, therefore, is kept to a minimum and enables hearing testing down to a minimum with faint tones. Okay, leave that little topic behind. Notice we're moving to the next bold-faced section. And again, like I always say, you've eaten that one fork full of food. Now this is a fork full of a different food. Okay? You've eaten your potatoes, now you're digging into your corn. So look at it like that. Just a different topic, always indicated by bold-faced writing, indicating another topic. So here we go. You've got three words here. Impedance equals resistance plus opposition. What does that mean in English? Well, that means objects can carry sound, a horn, air, whatever sound's traveling through a table leg, whatever, okay? Each object offers its own impedance to sound. Impedance. I'll stop sharing for a second. My hand up. You can't go through. The bouncer of a bar. You can't come in. Okay? Just some frequencies will be allowed to pass through the object, and some frequencies won't be allowed to pass through the object. It all depends on the object's resonance. You've all blown into a pop bottle, or lick your finger around the rim of a wine glass until, and you make that object vibrate, resonate. You've hit the favorite vibrating frequency of that object. Okay, so resonance is the favorite vibrating frequency of an object. It's the frequency of sound that object likes. It vibrates with it. Okay, it's like if you resonate with somebody, you get along. Okay, so think about it that way. And if you don't resonate with somebody, you don't get along. And that's called impedance. So impedance is the flip side of resonance. A frown is an upside down smile. Just think of them like that. They're reverses of each other. What isn't impeded resonates. What doesn't resonate is impeded. Okay, so with that in mind, let's look at our writing here and go in our notes. Impedance, the opposite of resonance, equals resistance plus opposition. Now read with me very carefully here. Any object offers resistance and opposition to the passage of sound going through it. Together, that's called impedance. Sound gets softer as it moves through things. In air, water, metal, they all impede the passage of sound. If they didn't, you in Springfield would be able to hear me talking in Vancouver, British Columbia, Canada. Okay, obviously you can't, except through Zoom. Okay, so you can yell, but if a person's too far away, he or she isn't going to hear you. There was impedance and opposition to your sound after a while, and it slowed down, okay, or it stopped. So sound through air bounces off water because water offers more impedance than air. It's going to happen. If you have your head under a swimming pool and I'm standing at the edge of the pool, and talking to you, you're not going to hear me. Okay, so it offered impedance. So here we go. In any object, a horn, let's say a musical instrument, sound going through it, there's going to be resistance. And think of resistance like simple friction. like ohms in electrical wires, the resistance. Think of it like friction. If you rub your hand across a table, here, friction. You rub your hands together, they'll start getting hot. Friction, okay? So sliding your hand back and forth on a table, you're going to notice a little bit of resistance. That's called friction, or friction can be called resistance. So think about that. Any object is going to offer some resistance to sound, and any object, the resistance that it offers is going to be equal for all frequencies. Okay, so put a star by that or write that down in the notes there. It's going to be equal for all frequencies. Any object's resistance, whatever that resistance is to sound, is going to be equal for all frequencies. Share screen. In any particular object, changing the frequency of the sound does not change the resistance. See? All right, so underline that or make sure you got that. Now we'll look at the other word called opposition. Let's look at that word now. Opposition is sometimes called reactance. What the heck is that? Well, stop sharing and I'll talk in English again. Mass resonates with low frequencies, doesn't it? If you're sitting in your living room and the neighbors upstairs in the apartment upstairs are playing loud music, what's going to come through your ceiling? The bass guitar and the drums, right? Boom, boom, boom. Because your ceiling has lots of mass and it's going to resonate with the lows. What's not going to come through the ceiling very much are the cymbals, all the high pitches. They're not going to come through very well because the ceiling has lots of mass, and mass opposes highs. Mass resonates with lows, mass opposes highs. Think of a locomotive, the front car of a train. Do you think you can jiggle a locomotive back and forth? Oh, you can't. It's got way too much mass. You can slowly push it this way and slowly pull it the other way. So mass resonates with low frequencies. Stiffness, on the other hand, resonates with high frequencies. Think of a spring sticking out of a wall. A big, thick spring. Like, think of a spring with it's got metal about that thick, okay? Just it's sticking out of the wall. If you push on that spring slowly and then pull on that spring slowly, you're going to run into a lot of opposition. But if you grab a hold of that spring and go, no problem. Okay? Stiffness resonates with high frequencies. Stiffness opposes lows. So opposition due to mass and opposition due to stiffness are called reactance, or simple opposition. So opposition due to mass, opposition due to stiffness, call that reactance, plus resistance equals impedance. And you flip that whole frown upside down, resonance. Okay, so think about it conceptually like that. Impedance has three parts to it. Resistance, which is equal to for all frequencies in any object. So resistance in any object, let's say, to the passage of sound. Resistance in this cup of coffee to the passage of sound is going to be equal for all frequencies. And then opposition due to mass, and then opposition due to stiffness. Whatever those all add up to be, that's called impedance. Flip it upside down, resonance. All right, now let's share screen and look what we said in our notes. Opposition or reactance right here. There we go. Opposition to sound due to mass or stiffness properties. Vibrations in any object are thus affected by mass and stiffness. Mass equals the amount of matter present, its density, like its weight. Stiffness equals the elasticity. Now, again, opposite to rubber bands, defined as its resistance to being distorted. The opposite of compliance, stiffness. In any particular object, Opposition is very different for different frequencies of sound. So changing the frequency of the sound will definitely change the amount of opposition that sound receives passing through an object. So if this cup resonates with certain frequencies, if I change the frequency, it won't resonate, will it? Okay, so opposition or reactance is very frequency dependent, totally, in any object. The opposition to sound depends on the frequency, totally, but the resistance to the passage of sound doesn't. All right, so we read down here, resonance, the opposite of impedance is the opposite. It's an object's favorite vibrating frequency where the least impedance is. If an object offers impedance to certain sound, it doesn't resonate with that sound. Resonance in any transmission system or anything through which sound passes occurs when opposition due to mass is equal to the opposition to stiffness. An object thus has a favorite vibrating frequency. This is its resonant frequency. In your PowerPoints, that concept we just talked about is shown in this particular figure in your textbook. What is it? Hearing Science Fundamentals. So if I have that book here to show you, but you've got that puppy, I know you do. Hearing Science Fundamentals by Lass and Woodford. This is the slide out of that book. Resonant frequency is when opposition due to stiffness is equal to opposition due to mass. You'll hit the resonant frequency of that object. But enough on that. Let's just kind of, as mass increases of an object, its resonant frequency goes down. Thicker strings on a guitar vibrate more slowly. A floor has lots of mass. Only the bass is heard from the neighbor's apartment. As stiffness of an object increases, its resonant frequency increases. So hold an arm out straight and stiff, and have your friend grab your fingertips and move your arm up and down while you hold your arm as stiff as possible. The person will run into more resistance, or more opposition, I should say. But if you jiggle it, no problem. Tuning forks. The longer, here, I'll pull out some tuning forks to show you. Okay, tuning fork of vibration. Here you go. Stop sharing. All right, here's a bunch of tuning forks. Take them apart. Little tuning fork, more stiff, less mass. I can't bend these very well either. They're very stiff. It's kind of hard for you to hear that. Okay, take a lower frequency tuning fork. It's got more mass. Look at that. There's way more in it. And I can bend these things a little bit together too. It's less stiff. Okay, it just happens to be that way. This is a lower frequency. It's really, it's hard for you to hear over the Zoom session like that, but okay, versus knocking myself on the head with tuning forks. Great. Okay, but you know what I mean, mass and stiffness and resonance. Okay, so we've looked at that. Now we're moving to another section, and this has lots to do with what we just talked about, but it also deals a lot with what you covered in anatomy last week. At the end of the anatomy Zoom session in 120, we talked about quarter wave resonators. So we're talking about resonance, so let's talk about resonators, okay? Quarter wave resonators are mentioned often in our field. The outer ear canal is a quarter wave resonator. Any tube closed at one end, like a cup, like your ear canal, okay, is a quarter wave resonator. And in our field, there's two of them, the outer ear canal and your throat, your voice. Because your throat, it's closed at one end here, and it's open at the other end. It too is a quarter wave resonator. Cool. They call that your vocal tract. So let's first look at the outer ear canal. It's about 1 inch long. It's 2.5 centimeters. Remember, a centimeter is kind of like a fingernail. Okay? 2.5 centimeters. The speed of sound in air is 340 meters per second. So it's going to resonate, your ear canal is going to resonate with sound waves 4 times its length. As a quarter wave resonator, your ear is going to resonate with sounds that are 4 inches long, or 4 times 2.5 centimeters, which is 10 centimeters. Okay, here you go. That's exactly what it says right there. So if we look at in metric, which we should because science is done in metric, okay, 2.5 centimeters is the length of your ear canal. It's a quarter wave resonator, so it's going to resonate with sound waves 10 centimeters long, and 10 centimeters is 0.1 meter. Recall from page 2 of your notes the formulas for wavelength, frequency, and speed of sound. Frequency equals speed of sound over wavelength. Let's go and look at those formulas. There they are. Let's go. Let's make sure we stay together here. All right, we're just about there. Here you are. There's the 3. I'll start right here. There you go. Wavelength equals speed of sound over frequency. What's the next one? Frequency equals speed of sound over wavelength. And speed of sound equals frequency times wavelength. In plain English, here's example. 5 is equal to 10 divided by 2. 2 is equal to 10 divided by 5. 10 is equal to 2 times 5. All you're doing is flipping numbers around, but here's the trick to remember. We're not worried so much about this one. We'll leave that one alone. It's these two that we use the most. And the trick to remembering them is that the speed of sound is always on the top. Okay, it's always 343 divided by whatever it is, okay? Wavelength equals speed of sound over frequency. Frequency equals speed of sound over wavelength. So if you remember that, now let's look at the quarter wave resonator business so that we can answer a question regarding that. Here you go. Recall from page 2 of the notes the formulas for wavelength, frequency, and speed of sound. Frequency equals speed of sound over wavelength. So we want to figure out what frequency does the outer ear canal resonate with. That's our question. It's a quarter wave resonator, so we can figure it out. It's 2.5 centimeters long, so it's going to resonate with sound waves 10 centimeters long, and 10 centimeters is 0.1 meter. So the frequency that the ear is going to resonate with is 343 divided by 0.1. And you get your calculator out and you find out what the heck is that. And it's about 3,400 hertz, or to be exact, 3,430 hertz. I just put 34, just whatever. Close enough for government work, okay? So it's going to resonate with that frequency. So why is that important? I'll show you why that's so important. Because, here we go. The sounds of speech. Here's a picture of a hearing test. And the O's are the right ear's hearing, and the X's are the left. These numbers represent frequency: 125 hertz, 250 hertz, 500 hertz, 1,000 hertz, 2,000, 4,000, and 8. We test hearing at 7 octave frequencies. And octaves is when you double the frequency. 125 is kind of like low C on a piano. 250, middle C. 500, high C. And then octaves going higher. So you can see that we hear a lot higher than just the frequencies of music. But here's the letters, the consonants. See how they're very soft. The decibels, they're like 0 to maybe 30. They're soft decibels. These are decibels going down. So you can see that any sound you make with your throat, z, v, j, m, d, b, and then I, o, a, u, all those sounds are louder and lower. Your ear, now your outer ear canal, if we look at it, here's a picture of your outer ear canal. It's 2.5 centimeters long, or about 1 inch. It's a cylinder open at one end, and therefore it's a quarter wave resonator. But unlike your coffee cup, your ear canal is made of flesh and bone. You can wiggle it. Okay, so it's not a hard-walled cavity like my coffee cup. It's a little bit different. It's made of flesh and bone. So that resonant frequency of 3,430 hertz or whatever it was isn't only going to happen at that one frequency. It's going to be spread out. It's going to be fudged, smeared a bit. So what do we mean by that? It's going to be spread out. Let me get this picture here. It's going to be spread out across frequencies looking a lot like this. And there's your outer ear canal resonance. So here's how you can think about it. It's going to resonate with all of these frequencies. Okay? And it's going to resonate from about 1,500 hertz to about 4,000 hertz. And it's going to have a peak resonance at around 2,700 hertz. And how much of a gift is it giving you in terms of increasing the loudness of the sound? About 20 decibels. Now, next week, we're going into the decibel. We'll spend 2 weeks on the decibel, the other dimension of sound called intensity. We spent these 3 weeks mostly on frequency, wavelength, speed of sound. For the next 2 weeks, we're going to look more at the decibel from hell, okay? We're going to look at the second dimension of sound, in amplitude. But right now, stick with this, okay? So you're going to see the resonance of the outer ear canal. Because it is a quarter wave resonator, it's going to resonate with a bunch of high frequencies. And instead of resonating exactly at 3,400 hertz, because it's made of flesh and bone, that resonance is spread out a bit. But this is a gift, because if you lay that resonance down over top of what we hear in terms of the sounds of speech, it naturally elevates, it naturally lifts these soft, high-frequency speech sounds. And that's very important if you think of the words cat, hat, sat. I'll stop sharing. Cat, hat, bat, sat, mat. They all have but what made them different was the high-pitched consonants. And high-pitched consonants are soft. They're not very loud. So something has to help us hear these soft, high-frequency consonants, because consonants tell you what the word is. Not that the word was said, but what the word is. And the outer ear canal resonance helps us do that. Chances are, if we didn't talk, our ears wouldn't have this shape. That's essentially the nuts and bolts of it that way. So now, having looked at that, and when you think about the resonance here, I'll go back to this picture so you look at it closely. Think of a sound coming out of a speaker that's close to your ear. And let's say that sound was 125 hertz. And let's say you had a little microphone laying against your eardrum. So let's say the sound was coming from the speaker at about 50 decibels, which isn't very loud. What would you measure at your eardrum? About 50. So no added resonance was given. Let's say you had a 250 hertz tone coming from the speaker, and it came out at 50 decibels. What would I measure at my ear? About 50. So no added resonance. 500 hertz coming from the speaker. What would I measure at my ear? Again, the same, no more. 1,000 hertz coming out at 50 decibels from the speaker. What would I measure here? 50. 1,000 hertz at 50. No, nothing added. 2,000 hertz coming out of the speaker at 50 decibels. What will I measure at my eardrum? Probably about almost 70. Even though what came out of here was 50 because of the resonance. 2,700 hertz coming out of the speaker at 50. What am I going to measure at my eardrum? 70. Because I'm getting an added gift of 20. That's what I mean by the resonance. It's an add to the loudness of the sound. So your ear was literally made for hearing speech. What parts of speech? The high frequency consonants. Why? Because those are the softest. Think of the word call. What's the loudest part of the word call? It's the aw. The k isn't very loud, and k is high pitched, and aw is low pitched. Saw, paw, church, perch, lurch. Okay, it's those are the sounds you want to hear. So let's kind of briefly now look at another quarter wave resonator, and that would be the throat. And here's how we'll finish. Check this out. We'll look at a picture of the throat too. We'll look at a picture of it. Here's someone's head. Okay, so you're looking at this. Here's your larynx, your voice, if you feel your Adam's apple. And we'll look more at this in a couple of weeks, but we're looking just first right here. So that's the one end of the cup. That's the bottom end of the cup. And then you have your nasal cavity. Don't worry so much about what's in your sinuses. Look mostly at this. From here where my cursor is, out your mouth. Okay? So this is your sinuses. Don't worry about them. But this is the roof of your mouth. This is your throat. This will be your tongue, your teeth, and your lips. So now this is also a quarter wave resonator. Now it's a different kind because it's longer than your ear canal. Read what it says on the right here. It's 17 centimeters from your larynx, your voice, your Adam's apple, to your lips. It's about 17 centimeters in an adult. Okay, so now let's kind of look at our notes. And how come when you breathe in helium, have you ever breathed in helium from a helium balloon? You got to try it sometime. It's hilarious. If I had a helium balloon here, I'd do it. When you're talking, your voice is really high up. And then after a few seconds, your voice goes back down to normal again. But for the first few seconds, when you talk, after you've breathed in a little bit of helium from a helium balloon, your voice is high. Now, some people would say, don't do this at home or whatever, but everybody knows that it's true, okay? Helium balloons float. Why do they go up? Because the helium is less dense than air. So helium it's less dense than air, so it's going to try to go up because the molecules are less dense. If they were as dense as air, if you blow up a balloon yourself, the balloon, when you let go, it's just going to tung, 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 tung on the floor. It's the same density as air. But if it's helium, it's going to want to float, right? Okay. So now you have the tools for describing why your voice gets higher if you inhale helium. Let's look at our formula about quarter wave resonators, just for the heck of it. Here we go. Bottom of the page, look at our writing. Helium speech. Why is it high-pitched? Well, your vocal tract is 17 centimeters, the length from your voice, larynx, to your lips. It's a quarter wave resonator. And what do quarter wave resonators do? They resonate with sound waves 4 times their length. So it's going to resonate, your throat is going to resonate with sound waves that are 4 times 17, which is 68. And 68 centimeters is 0.68 meters. When you're dividing something, you've got to keep apples to apples. You've got to change centimeters to meters because you're talking meters per second, the speed of sound. So when you talk about the bottom of that formula, you got to keep that in meters as well. Meters to meters. You can't divide meters by centimeters. So 68 centimeters is 0.68 meters. So frequency equals speed of sound divided by wavelength. Frequency over 1 divided by, or is equal to 343 divided by 0.68. So your throat will naturally resonate with 500 hertz, about, sort of, kind of-ish. Now let's talk about helium. In helium, Sound goes 927 meters per second. Remember, it's less dense. The more dense something is, the slower sound goes through it. The more stiff something is, the faster sound goes through it. Okay, we talked about resonances early, but now we're looking at speed of sound again, because we're mixing speed of sound with resonance. Have a look. 927 meters per second. Okay, frequency over 1 is equal to 927 divided by 0.68, because your vocal tract didn't change. You inhaled helium, you didn't change the length of your throat. What changed was the density of the gas that you inhaled. So instead of sound going 343 meters per second like it does through air, it goes 927 meters per second through helium. So 927 divided by 0.68 is 1,300 and some hertz. It really hurts. Okay? So that's why your voice gets higher when you breathe helium. I just like to look at these two things. I just think they're kind of humorous, but you should know the basic principles behind it because we've covered those formulas. Okay, so speed of sound changes with mass and stiffness, and also resonance changes with mass and stiffness. They're all kind of interrelated, but you can calculate what is going to be changed, what's going to resonate with any quarter wave resonator just by using those little formulas. Wavelength is speed of sound over frequency. Frequency is speed of sound over wavelength. Basically, this takes us all the way through the end of Unit 1. So just as look at this all the way from the top here. Okay, we talked about Brownian motion 2 weeks ago. And we talked about sound waves. I said this was something to highlight, a series of squeezed and condensed molecules and then rarefacted. I said to you, remember, sound waves don't really go up and down. Sound waves are squeezing, separating of molecules. Sound waves are thus longitudinal waves, whereas water waves are transverse waves. The waves really do go up and down, and the direction of the wave is perpendicular to the up and down motion of the wave. That's water waves. We draw sound like water waves because it's easier. Okay, but sound really doesn't go up and down. And then I said, don't worry so much about this section at the bottom of page 1. I said that's kind of like for nerds only, FNO, or freak not out. But I did say you're going to often see the word sine when you're looking at sound, because sinuses talks about bends, and we draw sound waves like bends. So you're going to see them illustrated as sine waves. It's just what they do. 2 ways to represent sound. This is something you might kind of take a look at here just for the fun of it, and I'll tell you why. Because when we look at our PowerPoint slides and we go up, you're going to see things illustrated many times like this. A spectrum. So we can draw things like sound waves. Those are sound waves. And what's on the horizontal axis of sound waves? You can call it either distance and amplitude, or you can call it time and amplitude. Okay, so either way, sound waves are shown as amplitude is always on the vertical, time is usually on the horizontal, or if you're talking wavelength, the physical length of the wave. Okay, a spectrum is different. A spectrum is showing you frequency on the horizontal axis and amplitude again on the vertical. And in this particular picture, you're looking at a spectrum of a whole bunch of sounds. It's got 100 hertz in it, 200, 300, 400. And you can see that the amplitude gets softer and softer as the frequency increases. Doesn't have to. It certainly doesn't have to. Shucks, it can be like these. This can be a trumpet. This could be a clarinet. This could be an oboe. Who knows? Look at that. They may all have the same frequencies in them, but the amplitudes of the frequencies are different, aren't they? And these are called complex sounds. And we'll cover complex sounds in a couple of weeks from now. Instead of talking about a pure tone, 500 hertz, 1,000 hertz, 2,000 hertz, we're talking about a whole collection of them. And when you're talking about a whole collection of sounds at the same time, you need to show a spectrum, because then you can see all the individual frequencies in that complex sound. So Unit 2 that we're looking at next week is on the decibel, and we'll spend 2 weeks on Unit 2, and Unit 3 is on complex sounds. I just showed you a couple of spectrums there, spectra, just to give you kind of a heads up as to where we're going. Okay, but next week and the week after we'll cover the decibel, amplitude of sound, not so much frequency, amplitude. So now you've covered frequency as one dimension of sound, amplitude is another dimension of sound, and we won't cover phase that much. Okay, it's mainly frequency and amplitude, and then Unit 3, complex sounds, because most sounds are complex. Traffic, background noise, your computer projector, my voice, music, any sounds that you hear, they're almost all complex sounds. The only time when you're hearing a pure tone of 1,000 hertz, 2,000 hertz, 4,000 hertz is in a hearing test under headphones, which is very unnatural. Okay, so essentially, that's what I kind of, so in our notes, back to our notes here, and that's the PowerPoint slide. We'll get out of this and go to our notes here. So that's what this was. You got 2 ways to represent sound, waveform or spectrum. And more on these to represent sound later on in the section of complex sounds. Okay? We then said sound takes place with amplitude, frequency, and phase. Those are the 3 dimensions of sound. Then we covered frequency and period. And we said period is the time it takes to complete one rarefaction and one condensation. In other words, one cycle. And we said the formulas to remember for that is period is 1 over frequency, frequency is 1 over period. The higher the frequency, excuse me, the shorter the period. The lower the frequency, the longer the period. The longer it takes to complete one cycle. Same with wavelength. The higher the frequency, the shorter the wavelength. The lower the frequency, the longer the wavelength. So they are inversely related. Frequency and period are inversely related, and so is wavelength and frequency. And we said humans can hear from as low as 20 hertz to 20,000 hertz. Put a star by that. And we say, look at this, our very best hearing is for sounds between 1 and 4,000 hertz. Now, where have you seen that before? Well, looky, looky. There you go. There you go. The resonances of your outer ear canal helps that, that makes our best hearing between 1,000 and 4,000 hertz. Okay? Same with the resonance of the middle ear bones. The resonance of your middle ear, which we're going to start looking at in anatomy in 120 later today, okay? And we'll see that the resonance of the middle ear also is kind of around these frequencies. So these are the favorite frequencies, that's where your best hearing is. Back to your notes. Human hearing tests are done between 125 and 8,000 hertz, 7 octave frequencies. Many people don't always test at 125. A lot of people don't test at this frequency. I'll bring it closer. But almost everyone tests at 250, 500, 1, 2, 4, and 8. And sometimes at 125. So 6 to 7 octave frequencies. 6 to 7 octave frequencies, that's what we do hearing tests at. And you will learn how to do hearing tests throughout the courses of this program. Carrying on here, let's see if I can find that darn cursor of mine. Okay, keep going. Then wavelength and frequency. And they are also, as we said, recall, period is inversely related to frequency, so is wavelength. When you think period, please think of your watch. The time it takes to complete one cycle. When you think of wavelength, think of the physical length of the wave. Very good. Speed of sound, we covered that. You know that it is the greater the mass, the slower the sound goes through. The greater the stiffness, the faster sound goes through. And then you're looking at this here, and I asked you to kind of take a look at that. You don't need to remember the numbers. Nobody cares. Okay, just remember the concepts. You should know that sound goes 4 times faster in water than it does in air, and you should know that sound goes 14 times faster in metal than it does in air. The 4 and 14. Okay, very good to keep in mind. If I have that written down, I might, but then again, let's just take a look. Yeah, here you go. There you go. So you don't have to remember these numbers here, but do remember 4 times and 14 times. That's smart. Doppler effect, sonic boom, and now we're caught up to where we were today. So the stuff we covered today then, sound fields, echoes, reverberations, standing waves, anechoic room, and then we got into resonance and impedance. Remember the 3 elements that add together to create impedance, or on the flip side, that creates the resonance of something. Always remember, impedance is the flip side of resonance. A frown is an upside down smile. A smile is an upside down frown. What isn't impeded resonates. What doesn't resonate was then, therefore, of course, impeded. All right, this completes Unit 1. Of course, we finished our discussion with the ear as a quarter wave resonator and a little bit about the throat being a quarter wave resonator and helium speech, just for fun. Again, never think you have to memorize the number of helium or whatever. It's almost just there as a joke. But the point is, do remember the speed of sound in air as 343 meters per second. If you want to round it to 340, that's cool. Nobody's arguing there. Close enough for government work. Okay? This ends the Zoom session. I will stop recording and say live long and prosper, and we'll see you next week when we look at the decibel. So make sure you have your notes printed up on Unit 2. So go to a printer, print up those notes, and have those laying beside you. I think those are about 4 pages in total as well. And we'll take 2 weeks going through that unit. We're doing good. I think we're running according to schedule here in acoustics. Have any questions, do email me and shoot me a line. Otherwise, we'll see you next week. I'll stop recording now.